Should be recording.
We have a little recording.
I don't think it's recording. Oh dear God.
I got a notification that it is.
All right. So thank you all. Thank you all so much for coming and joining me with this. We are going to talk about love today. And you know, love is actually it's kind of hard to define. I sort of feel like Supreme Court, was his name? Potter Stewart, who said, "I know it when I see it." And he was talking about porn, but you know, same kind of thing. Sort of hard to define. Because think about it, there's so many different forms of love. There's romantic love, maternal, paternal, there's platonic love, there's self-love, tough love, and they're all love, but they all kind of manifest differently. So we're going to be talking about love. We often use art to express these many manifestations of love. And there are over 100 million love songs recorded, which I thought was cool. And there was a study on the psychology of music, and it found that over 2/3 of songs recorded in the last 60 years are about love. So we use art to talk about love. So after love, I had to look up what was next, was money, then partying, and then depression. Which sounds like, you know, a weekend. There you go.
There's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah, there is a lot of overlap there.
It's like a normal Tuesday night for me.
Yeah.
Pretty much, exactly. So we're going to talk about love and art, but let's start with introductions, who everybody is, and I'll just dive in first. And I'll ask you to tell me your name and who you are, what you do, and one cool thing about you. So I'll just start. I'm Dr. Martha Rosenthal. I have a PhD in neuroscience. I'm a professor at FGCU, and I teach neuroscience, physiology, human sexuality, drugs in society, and cannabis. So sex, drugs, brains, and bodies. I have the best job of all. And I write textbooks, and I wrote textbooks about sex and drugs. And let's see, one cool thing about me, when I was 9, I played violin at Carnegie Hall. And I wonder if there's a statute of limitations on that, because it's a lot of decades ago already, but I think I have to find a new cool thing, but I'm sticking with that one. So I'm just gonna ask you in order of my Zoom page right here. So I'm gonna ask Sarah to go first.
Hello, my name is Sarah. I was a student of Dr. Rosenthal's, which I took neuroscience with her. It was really a lot of fun. I actually graduated recently this past spring with a bachelor's in biology. So right now, I'm a medical assistant, but I'm in like a gap year before I go to medical school because I took her advice and decided a break would be a good idea. And then one cool thing about me, I speak French.
Excellent. I don't. That would be helpful. Thank you, Sarah. Maria.
So I'm Maria Rocca. I am on the faculty of the Integrated Studies program at Florida Gulf Coast University, where I was a founding faculty member along with Martha. I currently am the director of something called the ROC Center, which stands for Roots of Compassion and Kindness, where we teach compassion, kindness, and empathy to FGCU students and then take it out into the community, in particular to elementary school children. I had a couple of different possible things I was going to say about cool things about me, but it occurred to me in this context, probably the thing that I should say is that I teach a course in the 7 deadly sins, and we spend a lot of time talking about the difference between lust and love. So we'll probably come back around to that, I suspect, later.
Nice. Thank you. How about Tom?
Hi, I'm Tom DeMarchi, and I also teach at FGCU in the Department of Language and Literature. I teach composition and creative writing, and I also teach a course called Writing Theory and Practice that is attached to an event that I direct called the Sanibel Island Writers Conference, where we bring in a ton of different writers in different genres: poetry, fiction, creative nonfiction, screenwriting, songwriting. And we all get together once a year for 3 or 4 days, and people come and take workshops in writing. And I don't know if there's anything cool about me. I've spent the last week trying to think of anything that's cool. I mean, I guess it's cool that I know Martha and Maria, that we're friends. That's really cool. The conference is pretty cool. I don't know. I guess if you're a music fan, then you might find it cool that I've seen about 1,000 concerts in my life.
He has the biggest music collection of anyone I know. 4 rooms full.
It's obscene. There should really be an intervention.
That's very cool.
That's so cool.
I bought two records this morning before this.
Nice.
I support you personally.
Yes.
So there's a fine line between cool and pathetic.
Consistency is important.
Excellent. Emery, how about you?
Hi, my name is Emery. Oh gosh, I've been like rehearsing this in my head this whole time, and now that we've gotten to me, I'm like, what am I supposed to say again? Um, I'm a student at FGCU. I'm in the digital media program, which means I do like digital art and design. I had Dr. Rosenthal not last semester, but the semester before, if I remember correctly. Was it last semester? Everything is blending together at this point in time. Something cool about me is I am a costume maker, and I compete with those costumes at events throughout Florida.
Nice. I didn't know that. That's excellent. Cool.
Yeah.
Gina, how about you?
Hi, everybody. I'm Gina Poe. I'm a professor at UCLA and I study sleep. And so a cool thing about me is I've known Martha Rosenthal since before she had a PhD. Since 1988, we met at a place called Lake Arrowhead, California. And so I've had the pleasure of knowing her all these years. And then also my sleep research is revealing that sleep is really important for changing our minds, and really excited about what that means for lots of mental health disorders. So yeah, that's me. Thanks.
Many more cool things about you. She's amazing. So thank you. And Chris.
So I am Chris Michaels. I am a patent attorney, and I would suspect that the only cool thing about me is that I am married to Martha Rosenthal. So any of this wrong, there's high impact, for me in this discussion.
That's okay. That is the coolest thing about you. Let's go with it. Okay, cool. All right, so let's dive in. And what we're going to do is I've asked you all to figure out what song or poem or book or movie best encapsulates love to you. And sometimes with me too, it was hard to narrow it down to one, and that's okay. We could talk about a couple. And so with this artwork, what feeling do you get from it? And what does that mean about your view of love? So let me just dive in and I will start. Because the first thing that when I gave myself this assignment, the first thing I thought of was E.E. Cummings, a poem by E.E. Cummings. I love him. And so let me just quickly show that. So the first one I thought of was, I'll just read a little. Your slightest look easily will unclose me, though I have closed myself as fingers. You open always, petal by petal, myself as spring opens, touching skillfully, mysteriously, her first rose. And then I do not know what it is about you that closes and opens. Only something in me understands. The voice of your eyes is deeper than all roses, and nobody, not even the rain, has such small hands. And I love him. I just love E.E. Cummings. And so this is the first thing that popped in my mind, because I think E.E. Cummings is just so juicy, and he's just so sensual. And I think it fits with love because he's kind of out of his head. It's kind of a lot of words, and he's not following the rules, and it's a lot of words and a lot of thoughts just pouring out of him, and he doesn't follow the rules about spacing or punctuation or capitalization or any of this stuff. And so I think that kind of worked because the way that he's not following the rules, and it's kind of passionate, but it never really landed. I thought I would do that. And then I was like, I'm not sure if that's my choice. And then I was watching And the Band Played On, which is a 90s movie about the early days of the virus, HIV virus, the AIDS crisis. And it's a great movie if you haven't seen it. And at the end of the movie, the last song is actually the last song by Elton John. And I'm listening to this song and I thought, this is it. This is the one I'm going with. So let me show you that. So this is the last song by Elton John. And what it is, it's a story of a young man, a young gay man who's dying of AIDS. And he's estranged from his father because his father didn't approve of his orientation. And he's dying, and his dad came. And so just the words, I weigh less than a shadow on the wall, one more whisper of a voice unheard. And fear grows, please hold me in your arms. Won't you help me if you can to shake this anger? I need your gentle hands to keep me calm. And I can't believe you love me. I never thought you'd come. I guess I misjudged love between a father and his son. And I'm getting a little weepy just talking about this, and I have goosebumps. This one is the one that landed, because if you look this one up, I think the E.E. Cummings is about infatuation. You know, infatuation, oh, it's the passion and you're out of your head and it's all about the senses and it's juicy and all that. Love is you're there. You know, they were estranged, he didn't approve, but when he needed his dad, I'm getting weepy again, when he needed his dad was there. And so I think that's what I went with, is love, you're there. The passion can fade, the infatuation doesn't last that long, but you're there for your person that you love. So that's my thought. What do you think?
I really like that.
I think that's so beautiful.
It's a good song.
Yeah, and it ties in with my choice as well, this idea of you being there. Although I do love the E.E. Cummings one. Woody Allen used it in Hannah and Her Sisters. Michael Caine had Barbara Hershey read that in a book that he bought for her.
That's how I first heard it.
Yeah, and if you remember, your interpretation kind of aligns with the experience as dramatized in that movie, because it turns out it really was more infatuation than love.
Right. Yeah, it's a good movie too. Yes, thank you. So, Tom, how about you?
I'm next. Okay.
We're next. Yes.
So, as I told Martha, I want to give the disclaimer that I know nothing about love, really. Any little bit that I do know is just from trial and error, more error than anything. And from, a few 100,000 love songs and some books of poetry. But the one I went with is, it's an excerpt from a novel by a guy named John Williams, and the title of the novel is Stoner. And I don't know if you've ever heard of it or read it. It is often called the greatest book that you've never read, or the greatest novel you've never heard of. And this is the opening paragraph from chapter 13. And just to give you a little context, the book is really a beautiful meditation on the inner life that we all have. On the exterior, to an outsider, Stoner's life seems almost kind of unremarkable. But his inner life is so rich and faceted and complex, just like everyone's. And so that's what the book is about. And so he seems very staid and steady, drama-free on the surface, but underneath there's so much going on. And later in life, for the first time, he experiences true love when, and spoiler alert, he has an affair. And he's in a loveless, sexless marriage and completely dissatisfied. And then he has an affair. And I'll read you the excerpt. It says, in his extreme youth, Stoner had thought of love as an absolute state of being to which, if one were lucky, one might find access. In his maturity, he had decided it was the heaven of a false religion toward which one ought to gaze with an amused disbelief, a gently familiar contempt, and an embarrassed nostalgia. Now, in his middle age, he began to know that it was neither a state of grace nor an illusion. He saw it as a human act of becoming, a condition that was invented and modified moment by moment and day by day by the will and the intelligence and the heart. So, you know, as someone who has been an extreme youth and who sort of reached maturity a while ago, and is still grappling with it, um, idea that love is an act of becoming. It's a thing that you are active in. It's a thing that you it's revelation, it's discovery. And I think in its greatest iteration, love is having a connection with someone where it awakens in you your best version of yourself, where you're feeling unbelievably selfless and generous and concerned with more than yourself. Um, and everybody here, you've experienced that, right? Is that not the best? Is that not the greatest feeling? Is to find someone who makes you your best version of yourself and who actually basically eviscerates your ego and just like dismantles it and makes you a pure vessel of generosity.
Well, it's interesting just because it's like, in some ways, very selfish, because love
exactly.
is your best vision of yourself, but because you're giving to someone else.
Exactly. It's
yeah.
both things at the same time.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it just kind of makes you aware of the complexity of your humanity.
Now, how much is there a balance between giving to someone else and your best version of yourself? Because I think there's a tipping point when if you're giving too much of yourself, is that does it move from something of love to something to some pathology at some point?
Right. Yeah. Again, there's a fine line between love and obsession or possession. And to me, that would be an unhealthy perversion of love. That's no longer that's you digging deep into your ego again and thinking that you deserve someone. So to me, it's a giving feeling rather than an expectation for receiving.
I really like that, how you put it, like it's like giving and it's not always the same. Sometimes maybe you're giving too much, sometimes maybe you're receiving more. And that's kind of what I was going with too, with what the art pieces, plural, that I chose. But I really like how you put it and how you explained it that way. That was really neat.
I love the idea that
think
like love changes you into like a better person. I think that's so sweet.
Does it always change you to better? Does it ever change you to worse?
Probably.
I think it can.
It can.
I think it can. I mean, it certainly can. Again, it kind of introduces you to yourself moment by moment. And sometimes there's an ugly part of yourself that emerges.
And I think that Tom's choice of a book that was about an affair, there is a choice. Am I going to be true, to a promise I made years ago into a marriage? And am I choosing to follow into a hole, into a depressed state, or am I going to choose something more vibrant and fulfilling for myself and potentially for that partner? So one, I think there's a choice, and two, I think the recognition of sometimes choosing a bad relationship over a good one or a negative relationship, I think is what comes up. And it can still be love, unreciprocated love. I think certainly, you can choose to follow something in that context. So I think it's a very interesting choice for that specific question that you asked, is love necessarily improving who you are?
And you brought up about an affair. Is love necessarily monogamous? Is it only this is my object of love and that's it and nobody else? And there's a lot more, people are moving more towards polygamy. It's much more talked about. It's more openly accepted. But I think our view, certainly in America, is just like, oh no, you meet your one person, you meet cute, it's something romantic, and that's it. That's your person till you die. But I don't know.
Yeah, I'm the least scientific person here. The rest of you all have scientific backgrounds. But to me, monogamy I mean, it seems like monogamy is counter to human nature, but people do make the choice to make commitments, right? But again, like all of us here are adults, I'm assuming none of you married or committed entirely to the first person you ever fell in love with when you were 12, right? There have probably been a few people between then and now. And so, those commitments shift and change over time. And some people do find their soulmate or their partner for life very early in life. But most of us have a series of people who we love, and for whatever reason it doesn't work out, and then we move on, and then we fall in love again, which is beautiful that it's regenerative that way, and that there seems to be kind of a huge reservoir of love accessible to all of us.
Yeah, I think that.
Oh, go ahead, Gina.
I was going to say, I think that sometimes our confusion with love is that you have this one four-letter word for so many different things. Like there's love between a parent and a child, and there's love between two friends, and there's romantic love, and all of those are love for sure, but they have different manifestations. Maybe like a love between a parent and a child can be a kind of love that's absolute and sacrificial, and you really are dedicating your life as a parent to making sure that of the welfare of this child, and so it's a choice, and it's a becoming, and it's a daily, moment to moment process. But that's different from love between two people who have chosen each other for their life. And whether that is monogamous and forever, I think is kind of falsely bound by the fact that our lives are limited and we're mortal. And so we feel that acutely the pain of that limit and the pain of loss in advance that we know we're going to have when that person that we love dies or goes away. And so we feel that introduces, I think, jealousy in a way that love doesn't have to. If we were immortal and time were forever, we wouldn't need to be jealous, because okay, I love this person for 1,000 years, and for the next 2,000 they're going to go off with someone else, but I can hook up with them again in 1,000,000 years. It'll be fine, and spend the next 1,000,000 with them. So I think that limit of time makes us anxious, and I don't think that anxiety is necessarily part of love. I just think it's love in this mortal form.
I love that. And there's actually there was another contender for my choice for the piece of art. It's a song by a guy named Jason Isbell, and it's a song called "If We Were Vampires," and it basically explores that very concept you just articulated, which is it is our mortality, it is our expiration date that makes everything precious. Because if we were vampires and lived forever, things would not have the same value to us, because they'd be just transitory, and we could just move on. And it's like, hey, I can do this other thing later.
Excellent, good thoughts. Okay,
something I was Oh, I'm sorry.
I was gonna call on you and ask for your.
Hey. Well, I can go ahead and start talking about mine because it ties into my poem for mine. But I chose Oranges by Jean Little as my poem. It's very short, but I think it's really sweet. I can go ahead and read it real quick just because it's not very long. I peel oranges neatly. The sections come apart cleanly and perfectly in my hands. When Emily peels an orange, she tears holes into it. Juice squirts in all directions. Kate, she says, I don't know how you do it. Emily is my best friend. I hope she never learns how to peel oranges. This poem is so cute. It's among my top 2 orange poems, where the other one was also a contender, but I ended up going with this one because okay. So I'm 22. I don't have a ton of life and love experience. But what little I do have, to keep it real, has not been very good. I haven't had great relationship experiences so far, and it's kind of really soured my view on love for a long time. But something I have kind of worked out with myself and realized that I used to be like really kind of like hateful when it came to love. Like when I'd see all my friends in relationships and stuff, and I'd get like really jealous or like be mad or be like, okay, whatever, I don't care about you and your partner. Which I'd say like is so embarrassing, a little embarrassing, but also I was like 17, and who didn't do embarrassing things when they were 17? Um, but I kind of realized that like love is not really a finite resource, and is not something that like I'm going to have to wait for someone to come around to like teach me how to love or like show me who I am when I'm in love, because I can be in love. I can be in love with my everyday. I can be in love with the little things my friends do. I can love the way Emily doesn't know how to peel an orange. And that's sort of my view on love, that it's not really something that I'm waiting to have, or like something that someone's going to teach me, or something that even requires someone else. I can love waking up and seeing my cat look at me. I can love when I open I can love when I open the fridge and see my roommate bought me a Gatorade when he went to the gas station. Like it's just something that's every day for me.
I like that. And actually, that makes me think of something. So when I sent out this request to you all, did you first assume I meant romantic love? Was that the first thing that popped into your head? Because I'm hearing all there's maternal love, paternal love, platonic love. Because that's the first thing when I sent myself the assignment, I thought that. But there's so many more forms of love. So
Yeah, I got the email and I was like, Dr. Rosenthal, I really appreciate this, but I don't think I'm best suited. I didn't send this to you, but I was like, I don't think I'm best suited. I can forward this email to my friend who's been in a relationship for 8 years, but like, but then I was like, I don't have to do something on romantic love. And that's also why it took me so long to choose mine, because I was like, oh, she's not gonna like my answer because I don't have a great view on love, because I've never like been deeply in love like people describe it, and like I don't know, I don't understand like what it means to be like so deeply in love with one person. So like how am I gonna answer this? So that's why it took me like quite a bit to send my response before I like sat down.
So, now, do you think our society prioritizes or puts romantic love on a pedestal more than think of all the movies. Think about
Absolutely.
Why is that? Is
it way too much?
Is it spare your genes? That's the purpose of humanity. Or
I think it does tie back to that, and like obviously things are a little different now because society as a whole has become a lot more accepting of queer love, but like even then stories about queer love stories are like sorted into their own section, being like LGBT movies or like LGBT love songs, and it's like you can just put us in the world, like you can have someone just find out we exist, like come on.
It is true. As
if it's okay, can I jump in next? Because I'm such a contrast to Emery in terms of I'm maybe the oldest person on here, and I'm a widow, and I have a daughter that's grown and out of the house, and so I thought this was so easy for me when Martha asked me this question to pick my my song that immediately jumped to mind. And of course, other people who know me well knew that it didn't surprise them that I picked something out of musical theater. But it's, it's a song from Fiddler on the Roof. And, it's Goldie and Tevye, and he's hearing his own children talk about that they're in love. And so, Tevye goes into his wife and says, Goldie, do you love me? And as you can see, it's a conversation at first. You're a fool. I know, but do you love me? And she says, for 25 years, I've washed your clothes, cooked your meals, cleaned your house, given you children, milked the cow. After 25 years, why talk about love right now? And he says, Goldie, the first time I met you was on our wedding day. I was scared. I was shy. I was nervous. So was I. But my father and my mother said we'd learn to love each other. And now I'm asking, Goldie, do you love me? And she says, I'm your wife. And he says, I know, but do you love me? Do I love him? For 25 years, I've lived with him, fought him, starved with him. 25 years, my bed is his. If that's not love, what is? Then you love me. I suppose I do. And I suppose I love you too. Anyway, you can take that down. I said, I can't even read those lyrics without crying, thinking about me. Love is enduring. Love is something that isn't fleeting. That's lust. That's passion. That's all great. Funny guys. I was thinking about funny girl also, where she says passion is fine, but passion burns fast. Passion's design seems never to last. Better, better if who needs a lover? I need a friend. That long-term love is more about friendship. It's more about devotion. And, for those of us who've been in long-term relations, my husband and I were together for 18 years before he died. The passion's great early on, but there's a point at which you're dealing with all the nonsense of life, and just making time for there to be passion can be really, really hard work. But when that enduring love is underneath it all, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And so maybe the bigger word for me that's connected to love is commitment. And commitment means work. And it means work on both parties' sides, that you have to both be willing to work to maintain that deep, enduring, long-term love. So that was mine.
And commitment is a choice, and it's called the cold component of love. And you can't really control your passion, how you feel about it, but you can control whether you're going to be committed. So there's also infatuation and attachment and long-term relationships. They're all different areas of the brain, different neurotransmitters, different hormones. And so that whole infatuation, that lust is testosterone, and it's short-lived, really. Then the infatuation is maybe up to 18 months, and you got some norepinephrine, you got some low serotonin, you got different things going on, but the attachment long-term, that's oxytocin more. And so, and it's different parts of the brain. So we talk about love and we talk about all these components of it as if it's just one thing, but there's different manifestations, and there's different chemicals, and there's different brain areas. And it changes, as we were all saying, it changes as you change, as you're with your person, but the choice to commit is a conscious decision.
I love to hear all like the scientific stuff of like what's happening to make me feel all these ways. I'm as I mentioned, I'm not a science guy, I'm an art guy, but I love to hear all the ways that are like all the things happening to make me feel this way. I think it's so cool. Whenever you like go into it, I'm like, whoa.
There's another word that comes to mind as we're saying this, as I think about that kind of long-term love, is tenderness. There's a tenderness between people, so that I don't think, even if you want to be committed, if you've lost that sense of tenderness, I don't know that you can stay in the relationship, but you have to maintain that. Mm-hmm. So, as I think about, when my husband was dying and I'm having to literally change diapers and wash his body, and that what allowed me to do that was a sense of tenderness, that, that's a caring, that's a hold on a whole different level. And I think that that's at the essence. I mean, I'm Emery, like you, I am so, and Tom, I'm not a science person, I'm a humanities person. And so I think about things like spirituality and about, that level of connection that comes from the soul, that comes from the spirit. And I think that's where that tenderness comes from.
And I think tenderness underlies all these different forms. It underlies that initial, infatuation too. It's like you want to be there and you want to do nice things for them. And certainly as maternal, paternal, and platonic and long-term, kindness and the tenderness and the care underlies all forms of love.
Yeah, and I think that tenderness, it means that we recognize the humanity in someone else and their vulnerability, and we want to take care of them. There's something about us that, because I dated one guy once who was perfect. I mean, called him Stan the Man. He was absolute perfection, but I couldn't feel tender toward him because he was just, there was like no chip in the armor. There was no chink. There was nothing I could get my hands on and say, "Aw," So,
and I feel like to piggyback off of that, part of loving and like letting yourself be loved is to be vulnerable in that way, to like show that like chip in your armor, and like to allow someone to want to like take care of you, and like allow yourself to be taken care of.
I think that, that word vulnerability, I think when you connect with someone on a deep level, and if we're going to call it love, you create a space where that person can be vulnerable, and you also feel as if you can be vulnerable, which is so comforting and so necessary for true intimacy, I think. And that just becomes kind of a positive feedback loop, where the more vulnerability you're each showing, the more you want to show. And you again, you're kind of discovering who you are through exposure to someone else.
Yeah.
And you kind of grow together. I mean, this is obviously the most ideal. Love is very, very messy. And why is it so popular in our culture? And why are all these songs and movies and everything written? Because only trouble is interesting. And love is oftentimes uh, romantic love, familial love, love between friends. I mean, it's like it gets messy sometimes. But I think at its best, and again, I'm assuming all of you have felt it at its best, it encompasses the vulnerability, the tenderness. It's nourishing, and it's not just like heart expanding like the Grinch. It's like it's mind expanding because you're literally like laying down new plumbing of neural connections, and your brain is getting flooded with oxytocin, right? And you think and become a new person all the time.
I love it. Gina, I'm going to have Gina and then Sarah and Chris.
Oh, yeah. I want to say one other thing about this. Can you hear me? Am I unmuted?
Yeah, you're good.
Yes. Okay, good. Oh, good.
So what was your choice?
Well, my choice was Those Winter Sundays by Robert Hayden. I wanted to say one other thing, though, about this infatuation, because this is not about infatuation, the poem that I chose. But infatuation is like love on steroids, literally. I mean, you actually go a little crazy. And I think we need that, especially in our late teen, early 20s, or whatever the years are that we separate ourselves from the love of our parents, which is so strong and everything that we've known. To be able to, we need that flashpoint to be able to separate ourselves from our parents and go to someone else. I think that's why perhaps it's fleeting, and because I think to live that way would make us crazy. We just can't behave rationally when we're in that state. Okay, so anyway, this is about the long burning type of love that was spoken about by several people already. Those winter Sundays. Sundays, too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue-black cold. Then, with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather, made banked fires blaze. No one ever thanked him. I would wake and hear the cold splintering breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house, speaking indifferently to him who had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well. What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? And this poem makes me cry too.
Songs and poems from you guys. So fabulous. Go ahead.
Yeah. This one I love because it is about that long burning sacrificial love. No greater love hath no man than he dedicate or lay down his life and give his life to his friends. And this is, a man who would, with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather, he would get up early in the morning and face the cold to make the house warm for his family. And this to me is just, it's the epitome. It's the outward offices of love.
So it comes down again to tenderness, to doing, to showing up and doing for the person, even if you're not getting anything back.
Yeah.
Gina, I'm very moved by that piece. I think particularly coming from a culture where the men were not particularly effusive. They weren't going to be telling you all the time, I love you, but they would do things for you. And if you could see that, you could see the depth of the love. I think Tom and I come from very similar cultural backgrounds, coming from Italian families, where my dad didn't say he loved us, but boy, he did things for us. And those moments where you just knew. And little things like a little gesture. My dad used to walk by me and just gently tap me on the back of his head, as he was going between things. And it was just that. that I knew I was loved, and I think that type of love is really important and really worth recognizing and nurturing and helping people understand that love doesn't always show in the romantic, let me buy you big giant bouquets of flowers and be all kind of silly. That some of the best statements of love are getting up earlier than everybody else and making the fire so the house is warm. Yeah.
Many of you have probably heard of the 5 love languages, which
I was thinking of that too.
And so there's words of affirmation, acts of service, gifts, touch, and quality time. And we do see a difference in different cultures, that in Western cultures, we're more likely to value words. And in collectivist cultures, they're more likely to value acts of service. So they're less likely to be effusive and say the pretty words, but they're there making the fire and shining your shoes for you. And it depends on what you value and what your love language is, but we all have to learn to recognize if somebody's speaking to you in love in a language that isn't your native language.
I was, if it's okay to chime in here, I want to say, I think it's so beautiful the way we can see love in the little things that we do every day. When you mentioned just doing little things for people, it's such a out of left field thing, because it's not something I needed. Like, no one had put on a fire for me because I was cold. But like, my best friend, literally 3 years ago at this point, she walked by me after she was eating an apple, peeled the sticker off it and stuck it in my laptop and said, "Thought of you," because it said love and had a little orange on it. And I was like, you just don't want to throw your trash away. But I've kept that sticker on my laptop now. My laptop's on its last legs. It sounds like it's taking off every time I turn it on, but it's still got that faded sticker on it now that just says love and has a little orange for the O. Because it makes me feel so loved when I see it, because even if it was just she didn't want to walk to the trash can, it still made her think of me, and she still put it right on my laptop.
And I am going to dive in here and ask Sarah to do hers now, because a lot of what we're saying, I loved the one you sent me, kind of supports what we've just been saying about that. So are you ready to go? You want to talk about yours?
Yeah, going right off of Emory, actually, I'm going to start with William Wordsworth. I wandered lonely as a cloud, because I feel like what you were just talking about was the little things that linger. And that's kind of why I really like this poem, which it's like the only poem I've ever memorized even a little bit of. And it was the last bit for me, where it goes, "Often on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood. They flash upon my inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils." And it was based on this scene that he had seen of daffodils by a lake that were the most beautiful thing despite an amazing scenery. And that's what stuck. And it's not really about love, but that's what I took out of it. It was that some things just linger no matter how small, and you can find solace in that even in your times of sorrow. But I ended up going back and I was like, but that's just one part of love to me. And so I decided to go with a song called The Hymn of Axiom by Vienna Teng. And that was because there were 3 particular parts. I really want to focus on 2. The actual song isn't about love at all either. It's about how the internet can look into your soul. But I didn't know that until I Googled that. And I originally thought that it was about love. So I'm going to go to, it's in the second part where it says, "Someone is gathering every crumb that you drop, these mindless decisions and moments you long forgot," because to me, that represented sacrifice and compromise, because to gather every single crumb that somebody is dropping, the things they don't even remember they do, like a sticker on a laptop that maybe didn't mean all that much, but it showed how they thought of you. It showed rather than them telling. It was those actions. And then later on, the song goes, someone, or maybe it's earlier. It goes, "Someone is learning the colors of all your moods to show that you're understood." It's that intention behind the action where, yes, learning about a person is impossible. It's impossible to completely know a person, but even venturing to try to discover that complexity, that is still, in my opinion, sacrifice and compromise. And it's giving of your time. It's an opportunity cost that you're deciding to take in order to know this person, to show them that they're understood because you care about them. So I think that this song really showed me the action, I would say, that intention behind it though. Because love isn't always 50-50. You don't always get what you give. Sometimes you give 80 and you don't get anything back. Sometimes you receive like 30 while they receive 100. It doesn't always add up, but that's okay because love is always changing from mother to child to that same child to their elderly parent. It's still a tenderness, but it's a different one. And I feel like, yes, there's a vulnerability needed in that. And I think that without that vulnerability that we were talking about earlier, it can be a dangerous love almost because then there's things like manipulation and there's I'm going to hold myself off, but I want to know everything about you. And so I feel like it's a fine line you have to walk. And that's why intention is important for love, in my opinion.
I'm very disappointed to know that this isn't about love. Because I read this and it was like somebody hears you, they're learning the colors of your mood so that you're understood and known. That's what, don't we all want that? We want to be heard, we want to be known. So
Martha, as a media ecologist looking at that song, first of all, I would like to do a whole new podcast just about that song. It also gets to that need in humans, and that's partly why the internet is so addictive, because it is doing all those things. It's collecting every little piece of information about us. Maybe it's something we all wish the person that we would fall in love with would be willing to do, but hey, at least the internet will do it.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead, Martha.
No, you.
I was just going to say, I mean, one of the basic acts of love, maybe the first act of love, is paying attention. You know, being seen. When any of you say, I love this song, or I love this movie, or I love this book, you're paying attention to that thing, aren't you? And you're revisiting it over and over, and it's revealing new depths every time you expose yourself to it. And that's how it is with a person, right? You say, I love this person. What you're saying is, I want repeated exposure to this person. And every time I go there, there's something new that's fascinating and, teaching me about them. There's a new layer that's pulled back. And, I think what we're all saying is, and I hate to do this because I'm a writing professor, and so I always say, get away from cliches. But I think what we're all saying is love is an act, right? Love is a verb. And I mean, like Emery, that story that you told about your friend, like, I feel like if you were my student, I'd be like, you have to write that poem about,
I have.
the love sticker on your laptop.
I had an assignment for my class and I wrote it. One of my creative writing classes asked me to write a poem, and I did write about that.
Boom.
I find actually that the poem we just read is interesting in the context of our current society. I mean, we are not typically marrying people that we went to school with as children, right? Whereas we grew up in a village where we knew literally every thing that person had done, since they were an infant. And I think somewhere in the neighborhood of an hour after our first interaction or, email back and forth with Martha, I bought the very textbook that is the second edition. And so we're speaking, for hours on a phone. We were, going back and forth by text, email, and it wasn't enough, right? And the crumbs that were left, in the sense that I could go look up, was her textbook. And, I got her voice, literally over the phone, and then went to bed each night reading her textbook, and getting her voice, in a writing context, but also learning, how did she put together this textbook? There was 1,700, references that made the cut into the book. And one of the things that was just absolutely constant in the early part of our relationship, she was writing another textbook. And so any given time, on the table was spread out all the articles that were being considered for the next chapter. And in that case, it was her drugs textbook, but I'm a biochemist by background. And so I could understand what was going on. And it was always different articles. I mean, there were dozens of very interesting fact points that were, she was reading a 12 to 50 page article to make one sentence, in a textbook. And out of the 50 to 100 references that she was considering, 25 would make it, into, an actual written chapter. And finding, watching her do that was fascinating to me, as in a new relationship. And, Tom, you were referencing listening. I think that in listening, reading, watching, every kind of input there was, got to experience her in a way that was beyond what you're going to pick up over a conversation at dinner, right? And I think that was very compelling to me.
Probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to. So I was writing the textbook while I was with my relationship before Chris. And so I was writing the textbook, and my ex refused to read one paragraph, wouldn't read one word of the book that I was writing for 7 years. And then the day after we had our first conversation, he bought the book and pretty much read it in 3 days. So that was to be seen, to be heard. It's So Chris, I'm going to call on you now, and I'm going to have you talk.
That makes me so happy.
That's so sweet. By the way, I'm like listening to this, and I'm like, oh, that's
I know.
Yeah, I'll spell that in a hurry once you see what I picked from my. And so, Emery, actually, I want to, as I go into this, you talked about your age and what your experiences. I first read this sonnet, I think I was 14 years old, and we had just finished reading Romeo and Juliet in my freshman, English writing course. And I love Shakespeare. I mean, in most of his other plays, probably one of my least favorite, because I spent virtually the whole time rolling my eyes. And I had a very good English teacher who was helping us decode it and understand, hey, this is really quite raunchy in a sense, let our, had to explain to us what a Palmer's kiss was, which is, putting up two hands, let our lips do what our hands do, and he's basically trying to, propose making out. And so we got a fairly decent intro to Shakespeare, but what I found was that it was all about infatuation, and a whole bunch of people died because a couple of kids, have gone crazy, to jump off of Gina's comment. And I knew at 14, having relatively no experience in relationships, that was not where I wanted to end up. So if you've got it on my screen too, Martha, but if you, so it's are you putting it up? There we go. So, I mean, the first line got me right away. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. I'm like, okay, I'm in, right? And it goes on to basically describe all the ways that his partner is not all of these things, flowery things that most poets will go. And it's the last couplet that I think is what has always grabbed me and where I've aspired. And yet, by heaven, I think my love is rare, as any she belied with false compare. And it might have been our first date, it might have been our second, but I basically told Martha, I have never successfully answered the question, how do I look in this? Right? I know a lot of the wrong answers, but apparently you look fine is not among them, right? And it's completely accurate. She told the story and woke me up one morning asking what I thought of a necklace she had worked for hours on. And I looked at it and gave a completely true and accurate answer of, it is brown. That was not well received. And I think that what I've looked for in our relationship is I think I see her quite clearly. And I think my love is quite rare. I could not get enough. I do think that I fell into that compulsion. I went through a phase of limerence and was absolutely attracted to her. And I wanted to read everything she wrote. I wanted to talk all the time on the phone. But I think I was seeing her very, very clearly, and I made a choice and continue to show up. And, I think there's a power to that choice and the work, that Maria was talking about being put into it. And I think my vision, even at 14, was I want to find somebody I want to grow old with. I want it to be rare. I do not want to have to be dishonest, or I want to be able to talk openly about, hey, our hair is getting gray, it's falling out. It is sitting on a porch, a glass of lemonade, looking at a sunset that was something I wanted at 14. It's something that I wanted at 40 and at 55. And, it is where I think, I hope that's where I exist. Martha may have different feelings, at any given point in time. But I think for me is being able to see your partner for who they are exactly, and then still choose to want to be there, right? And I'm not a fan of a lot of the romantic movies because it's these people wrapped up in what I consider fairly blinded passion. It just doesn't ring true to me. It's not permanent. It has a ephemeral nature that I don't aspire to. Anyway, that's my take on it.
At first I was like, this isn't romantic at all. I know he's saying, okay, my true love has wiry hair and bad breath in the morning and she stomps, but as our bodies are going to change as we get older, and we can't stop that. But who you are, to be seen, to be heard, to be known, and make that act to choose that person over and over again, actually I think is really romantic. Took me a while to see it, but he's pulled me over to his point of view of only use a carry-on bag when you travel, and he's pulled me over to his point of view of love.
Yeah. It reminds me of what Gina said earlier about how she was with this guy who was perfect, but there was no chink in his armor, and so she couldn't really connect entirely. And yeah, I mean, we love people not despite their imperfections, but almost because of them. Right? It's like when you are given the privilege of having access to someone's dark side, and I'm talking about their interior life, not just the blemishes on their face or the graying hair or whatever. I mean, like when you're seeing them honestly and openly and completely, the good, the bad, and everything in between, that is such a privilege. And again, it creates that space for true intimacy and connection.
Yeah, I was reading.
Final thoughts from everybody.
Well, I was reading from the love chapter in Corinthians and also from in John in the Bible. And one of the things it said that impressed me is that love is honest. And the way that it's honest is, or the reason why perhaps that it's honest, is because when we truly love someone like we love ourselves, we don't want to fool them, because, well, when we fool ourselves, it's always trouble. It's always a rude awakening when we've stopped fooling ourselves and figure out what's real. And so I think seeing someone for who they actually are and letting them know who we actually are by being 100% honest is, like you say, it's exposing ourselves, it's making ourselves vulnerable, and it's respectful of them in a way that you want to be respectful when you are fully loved and when you're loving someone else, because we know it's better, and if we can trust them with that, that's it. That's amazing.
Yeah, I know you just spoke on Corinthians, but you reminded me of the book of John in the Bible, where it talks about loving somebody first, despite who they are then or who they might be later, whether you discover that by curiosity and choice or by circumstance. I feel like that's a really beautiful way to look at it.
I don't have a biblical anecdote, so I can't piggyback off of that, but a very, very quick little story. In my first year, with I had a bad first year of college, but my second year of college, I moved in with my roommates, who are now my best friends. I don't live with them anymore, but they're the closest people in my life. And I remember I was having a really horrible day, and at that point in time, my comfort food was grilled cheese. I was having a horrible day. It comes back to the story. I promise it's not just a random thing. But I was having a horrible day. I wasn't getting out of bed. I wasn't like socializing and stuff. And my roommate Hannah comes in my room with a grilled cheese on my favorite little ceramic plate, which is this little heart that I got from Goodwill. And she says, I made you this. And I said, how did you know I'd want that? And she said, to be loved is to be known. And I feel I've been saying that ever since. And I feel as if we keep circling back to it, that loving someone is knowing them. She knew my favorite plate. She knew I was having a bad day. She knew I would want that grilled cheese. And I did feel so loved in that moment.
Oh, nice.
It takes work to know someone too. So I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's interesting that spirituality came into the conversation fairly late in our discussion of love, yet it being one of the first commandments of love God and how it is often expressed. And it reminds me of it was a part of a class that I took, but the Martin Buber talked about the relationship one has with God is it, and I think we look at what was transitioning from our current theology or monotheism is going from a transactional nature of I pray, I make a sacrifice, and I get good, yield in my fields, to I'm going to have a spiritual relationship or a loving relationship with a deity. And I think the way that most of us would argue experience something beyond a physical transaction, and the closest we could get to spirituality is a feeling of love. I mean, two people come together and there is something that exists between them beyond, I lifted up this object and I handed it to you, that there's a feeling and a lifting up of each other's emotional being and even spirituality, that is our closest reference to spirituality, to God. It's described that way often in a religious ceremony for marriage, but I think that is our closest hint of an explanation of what a God presence in our lives could be.
I 100% agree. I feel like human nature, like you crave love, and whether even the Bible says God is love, like that's just what humans crave. And I feel like whatever that is for someone, I think that's important to humans, like to have love in your lives, because I feel like without love, life can be kind of bleak.
Yeah, picking up on your Hungarian, the notion of the
No, you go ahead.
The notion of the I thou, versus the I it relationship, that we are in a world where there's so much I it, and we crave the I thou. And what you said earlier, Chris, that I really resonates, the notion of finding that partner you can grow old with is an I thou relationship. And when you get to that point where the kind of funky things that your body starts to do as you get older, and you giggle together when those things happen, instead of going, oh no, I'm so embarrassed. Like the embarrassment is gone, the comfort is there. It's almost as if you become one. And I think the other word I wanted to use is there's a sense of safety. There's a sense that you're secure, that you don't have to be worrying, oh, is he looking at somebody else? Is, that you are truly the apple of that person's eye. And, they may window shop, but they will never go in the store. And, that's really true, deep, enduring love.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that kind of security is because you are in a place of non-judgmental place, right? You're not judging, you're just trying to understand on a deeper level. It's truly compassionate and empathetic at its best.
This was fabulous. Thank you, guys. I love you.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having us.
I want more, and I hope you'll join us for others. So,
I love all of you too.
Oh my gosh, I love you guys.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
I feel like I learned a lot.
No, definitely.
Me too.